Thank you. You can hear the panel. I think we're live too over here. Hello, everybody. Go ahead, Claudia. I'll let you start it off.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this amazing panel. I'm honored to be a part of this. We have some legendary Black excellence, just humans on this panel that are just amazing. The history on this panel, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. So without further ado, let's get into this discussion we're going to be having tonight. And hopefully this will carry on and will inspire future conversations about where we are as a people, where we've been, and where we're going, and the change that we can inspire if we put our energy together. I was asked to do this panel by my dear friend Kinyumba Mutaka Bear, and he has put together this amazing film that hopefully most of you have just viewed it. Let me not mess up this name because I am known for that. That is my specialty. Okay, so NGUVU kwa WATU, which means power to the people. How did I do, Kinyumba?
Oh, that was beautiful.
I nailed it.
Oh, Queen. There you go.
Okay. So I watched your film, and let's get into that discussion. But without further ado, let me introduce our amazing panel. Let me introduce civil rights activist, icon, and so much more, Dr. Benjamin Chavis Jr. Please welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
An honor to have you here. Also, actor, model, activist with an amazing story to tell, Mr. Jeremy Meeks. Hello, Jeremy.
Hello, how are you? It's a pleasure.
Likewise. And once again, I already mentioned his name, but actor, activist, and executive producer of the film Power to the People, Kinyumba Mutaka Bear. Hello, my friend.
People with those Black Melanin, thank you guys so much.
And representing Maryland's 24th District, currently serving as the chair of the Maryland House Democratic Caucus, Jazz Lewis. Hello, Mr. Jazz Lewis.
Thank you, Miss Claudia. Happy to be here. Thanks, Kinyumba.
Likewise. And last but not least, former ACU civil rights attorney with a lot on her resume. I was looking her up, Miss Salimah Hankins. Hello, Miss Salimah.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, welcome everybody here. Everyone's resume is extremely long and impressive, and I'm glad to have you all here. I think we couldn't have picked, well, Kinyumba, you couldn't have picked a better panel, so thank you so much. Now, today is the 1-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, and it's also Africa Day. So it's just amazing how it all came together. Kinyumba, you didn't know that when you put this together, correct?
I did not know the Africa Day part. I definitely knew the George Floyd murder, and I wanted to make sure that we made certain that day was going to never be forgotten. So that's why we picked the day. But the African Day is beautiful serendipity, especially with consider that we was named with an African language.
So let's get into the film quickly. Why did you make this film?
Well, to me, it's important that we don't just stop with the protests. And we have been through this cycle before. You know, I'm an 80s baby, so I remember Rodney King very well. And, you know, I'm tired of that cycle. And I think that we have so many powerful minds and people who have contributed so much to our culture that we should be able to do something for ourselves. And we should be able to make a change. And I wanted to create something that at least can keep the conversation forward, driving the conversation forward. And what was important to me was not so much this film being seen, but also what can come from the film. And that's why I wanted to have this panel, so that we can try to continue to have a conversation, but also to put words to action to these conversations.
Dr. Benjamin Chavis, you have been around and worked with, and are a civil rights icon yourself. Do you see things getting better or worse? Because for a while it seemed like things were getting better, and then I'm not so sure these past few years.
Yes. Thank you, Claudia, and I'm just honored to be in all of the fellow panelists' presence. I will go straight to answer to your question. Things have gotten better, but also things have gotten worse. It's not just a straight line. We've made some progress, and because we made progress, there was this backlash for 4 years. That's how Trump got elected. You know, keep in mind, after 8 years of Obama, then we get 4 years of Trump. Now, we have Biden and Harris, and they're also facing strong headwinds in the aftermath of Trump. In fact, the Trump forces are trying to get back. But the thing is, this is 1 year after the murder of George Floyd. And I'm glad Brother Kiyamba did this film, because if it were not for the video, the film of what happened to George Floyd, we would not be having this discussion on this day. We must not see what happened to George Floyd as isolated. I think years ago, Claudia, Frederick Douglass said it best: freedom is a constant struggle. And what that means is we fight, we struggle, we make progress, but then you have to hold on to that progress, because those reactionary forces will come back to take that progress away. And so, yes, we made progress, but we also have vulnerable forces, reactionary forces, that want to take away the progress. They want to make sure that we don't end poverty, to make sure we don't end the disparities. One of the things that COVID exposed was all the pre-existing conditions in Black America. It's part of the whole system of racism, systemic racism. So we need to work on it. Claudia, I think we need to control our narrative. And to me, that's what this film is about. NGUVU, WATU, power to the people. We have certain powers that we need to never lose sight of. At the end of the day, we have to control our own narrative, control our own truth, and push forward to make sure that the next generation doesn't have to experience what we've experienced particularly over the last 12 months.
Very well said. I want to go to Jazz Lewis next. Being that you're in politics and, boots on the ground, how do you see the resistance to black people in politics, and how do we get more of us into politics to help fight this fight from the inside?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I want to thank Kiyamba again for bringing me on. First and foremost, I think to answer your question, it's about organizing and building power among our folks. I believe that organized communities bring better resources, better outcomes for the people. I started my career as a community organizer in Baltimore, and it served me since then. Too often, I think we do find resistance to, Black liberation and valuing Black lives, whether that's in the economy, whether that's the criminal justice system, you name it. And to some degree, you can work with others, to try to see where you can make progress. But often it's making sure you get people elected who are like-minded. Ultimately, it's like, you can only go so far with people who don't value your empowerment or your liberation, or your freedom. So for me, I have been unapologetic about trying to elect other folks of color and allies who are in the struggle with us. If you believe in the liberation of Black folks, then you're possibly getting my support.
Do you feel it's even possible in this? It seems like everything's so tribal, right? It's our side versus their side, and it sounds nice that to walk, reach across the aisle, but it seems like the other side isn't playing fair. Like with all these new voting restrictive rules and laws they're trying to pass, they're trying to make sure that we don't get any more of our people in office.
I agree with you on that. I will add though that one of the things. Sometimes I think when people think of who's benefiting from certain policies that get pushed, they focus on the most disadvantaged group, right? So if I say raising the minimum wage is going to help women of color, then they think, well, this is a bill that's uniquely going to help women of color. What they forget, though, is that the way systems work in this country, that means that for wages to live for women of color, that means men's wages have to live. That means white women's wages have to live. That means everyone's wages have to live, and they forget that part about it. It often becomes battles, tribal battles along partisan lines, but too often too. I'll tell you, I live in Maryland, which is a Democratic stronghold state, and I often have to hold other Democrats accountable, to the promise of which they say they believe in to make sure we get change. I actually passed a bill on prison reform, giving juveniles who are sentenced to extremely long sentences a second chance. The Senate sponsor of that bill, I sponsored in the House, the Senate sponsor was a Republican. I came to it from a humanitarian standpoint. He came into it from a fiscal prudence standpoint. Either way, we reached at the point of realizing that these sentences were disproportionately affected certain groups of people who weren't really given a fair shot and they needed to. So whoever, like I said, is willing to work and toil for the liberation of my people, you're open to getting my support.
Thank you very much. Jeremy, I want to go to you next. You've been very vocal about your past and your time in prison, how unfair it is, and how our people are, of course, disproportionately sentenced time and time again. I mean, a Black person steals a car, it's grand theft auto. A white boy does it. Oh, he's joyriding. So I want you to speak on that a little bit, on how unfair it is in your experience.
It is, they don't even try to hide it. It's very blatant, that the sentencing is so lopsided. And it all comes down to a paycheck, prison is really, really big business. When I was incarcerated back in 2002 in San Quentin, every time you get off of the bus and you are booked into R&R, the state receives $3,500. And then for every day that you are housed in the prison, they get $110 a day to house you and feed you. But it doesn't cost that much. It probably costs them, truthfully, maybe $2-3 altogether. So it is very, very big business. And when I was there, it was maybe 36 state prisons. Now there's double because there's a lot of privately owned prisons. And the more prisons they build, the more beds they have to fill, or everyone's losing money. And so they are overpopulating. It's overflowing with young brothers. It's really sad. They actually had people sleeping on the bunks out on the tier. And the federal government came through and actually gave them fines for doing illegal overpopulating of the prisons. So it's really, it really makes you feel powerless when you're sitting in that courtroom and you see a white man with the same charge receive suspended probation, and then you go up right behind him and for the same charge receive 8 years with 85%. You don't know what that does to a person. To see it time and time again and hear the story time and time again, they say the system's broken. It's not. It is working perfectly fine. It was not designed for minorities and brothers and sisters. It's,
So it's working the way that it was designed to work.
Yeah.
It's not. Yes.
1000%. 13th Amendment.
Joe Collins, I did not mean to skip you. I'm sorry about that. I need stronger glasses. I'm 48 years old and I'm halfway blind. So my apologies to you. Now, you are a Black Republican who ran against Maxine Waters. And, this is something we don't really get to have these conversations that often. And I hope this is a safe place where we can have our conversations. We're not going to treat you like Meghan McCain on The View. Okay, so I want to get your thoughts about the Republican Party. And is there a place for Black Americans in the Republican Party? Because it does, from an outsider looking in, it doesn't feel like it. So can you speak to that?
Thank you for having me, NGUVU. Also, great film. There's a place for Black people everywhere. You just have to make it. I think one of the biggest things is, for a lot of people, we suffer from trying to fit in with social norms, whether it will benefit us or not benefit us. For me, I'm a Republican because of the history of the Republican Party. Now, where the party is right now is neither here nor there, in my opinion, because I don't personally feel like any party has our best interests in mind, especially when you talk about organizations like the NAACP, who are supposed to affect change positively for the Black community. You have the Congressional Black Caucus, who has the every single Black congressman or person who was Black in the Senate, who has over to pass positive legislation that could improve our communities. So I think for us, the same way Black people made a way in the Democratic Party, the same way Black people have to make a way in the Republican Party, or being independent, or being a part of the Constitution Party, being a part of whatever organization you want to. Personally, I don't look within. I look to make a change. I don't ask for help from anyone in the Republican Party. Everything I do for myself, because I'm a free thinker. I'm a US Navy veteran, and I don't get discouraged that easy from anything or anyone. And I'm always accepting of a challenge. But for Black America, we're going to need allies on both sides, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, if we are to get through process in America.
Okay, we're going to get more into that, I'm sure, later on in this conversation as well. I definitely want to revisit some of that. Salimah Hankins, I definitely want to talk to you about the work that you've done. You've worked with the families of George Floyd, Mike Brown, Breonna Taylor, and unfortunately, so many more. I only say unfortunately because the list is it seems to never end. What kind of emotional toll does that take on you as a Black woman? Because, I got to say, Black women have been at the front lines, really. Not to take away from our Black men. I don't want to come off like that. But I'm just saying, what kind of toll does that take on you as a woman seeing all this? And is it difficult when you go home? Is it difficult to not take that work home with you?
I think it is difficult. And I can't say that I have not taken the work home with me. I think one of the reasons why I sort of transitioned from civil rights to human rights was this thing that Jeremy was talking about. It's it gets to the point where people are not looked at as human. And I was really interested in what it would look like to bring back the humanity to people who are victims, whose families are victims, and who are caught up in a criminal justice system, and actually looking at the examples of what other countries are doing, and what are the international human rights standards? What are the norms? What is a human right? What does that mean? So working with the families, I think, has been really emotional, but also extremely rewarding. I recently did an event after the death of George Floyd. My former organization took the case of George Floyd to the UN, and it was the first time a country in the developed world was held to account for human rights violations against people in the United States. George Floyd's brother, Philonis, gave a really impassioned plea that left not a dry eye in the House. And then in August, I did an event with the families, and I wanted it to be focused on healing, because what I realized is that even in asking these families to recount their stories for the public, for marches, for the cause, there's a trauma that we in the movement are actually re-inscribing on these families. And Mike Brown's father said, there are a lot of events that I just won't go to, because I don't want to talk about how my son was left laying in the ground for 4 hours. So that event was really talking about what does it look like for these families to be able to heal, and what does it look like for us as a community whose movement actually benefits from these families telling their stories. What does that look like? So the event was actually around what was Mike Brown like as a kid? What brought him joy? What was Eric Garner like? What was Sandra Bland like? And to have these families light up and be able to tell those stories was actually really moving. It brought the humanity to me back to these people who we only think about at the moments of their death. So I think for me, it's that is the thing that has energized me and made me feel like this work can be traumatic, but also healing for myself and for the families.
Great points about the humanity finally being shown, because I have to say that I was actually shocked that the trial, of Derek Chauvin showed so much humanity for George Floyd, because all too often we just see the one picture of us, where we're in a compromising position, we're holding a gun, we're flashing a gang sign, joking around, whatever it is, they find that picture to represent the victim every single time. They don't show you with your graduation cap on. They don't show you with your family. They don't show you working hard. They don't show you as a smiling child. They find the most ominous looking photo to dehumanize. And the George Floyd case, we got to hear all the negatives, and he still finally got justice.
Yeah.
Let's get into this. Were you all surprised about this? Because I certainly was, even with all the evidence, because we've seen this before. Whoever wants to go first.
I can. Oh, I'm sorry. Does someone else want to go? I can just briefly say for me that I think that we did see a marked shift in 2020. And I think, there's this idea of like needing to have the perfect victim, like the victim needing to be like never had like a record or anything sort of bad in their past. And obviously that, I think in this situation, because we had the video and because there was something about not just, we usually see the person who is being attacked or being killed on these videos, but to have seen this police officer kneeling on George Floyd's neck, very casually, glasses up on his head, arms in his pocket. I think that there was something about that casual taking of life that was really, I think, created a shift. Now, I don't know if that's going to transition into, other people who are in this situation, but I do think that it was surprising that that even with all of the evidence that, in the way that these cases go, that, the jury reached a verdict, and I think it was surprising, but also because of the context, not as surprising.
Got it.
Yeah, if I may. Oh, go ahead, Doctor.
Yeah, I just want to relate it back to the film. I think that, again, having the courage to tell our own stories, tell our own narrative. I represent the Black press of America. There are 230 African-American-owned newspapers all over. Many of them are second and third generation papers. This year is the 194th year of the Black press, since 1827 when Freedom's Journal was first published. But the point I want to make, tied into what Salimah just said, I think that there has been a shift, but what happened after George Floyd, the murder still continued. We've had numerous cases of racially motivated police murders since George Floyd. And even though the Congress has passed, the House has passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the Senate has not. And the Senate is stalling. But to me, it's the larger context. And that is why you have people all over the world that now engage in the movie that my brother Kenyamba has done, because people are raising questions of which way forward. In my younger years, I actually worked with Dr. King. His last book before he was killed was Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? And if you go back and study the Kerner Commission from the 1960s, it said that a lot of the urban rebellions started because of racially motivated police brutality. So this is not a new issue. What may be a slight change is how not only Black people are responding, but white people, Latinos, Asian Americans, Native Americans, people of all colors. But it's being led by communities of color. And I think that the thing that I like so much about what Kenyamba has done with this movie is having us not only have this discussion tonight, Claudia, but the question is, what will be our ongoing discussions? What will be our ongoing engagement? I think there was ever a time that for people of African descent, to stand up and raise up and boldly speak out and control our own narrative. Going back to the prisons, I'm so glad what Brother Meeks said about the inhumanity that goes on in the prison. The prison system itself is inhumane. I think the criminal justice system is appropriately named. It is a criminal system, you know, and one of the reasons why we have this mass incarceration is because the system itself needs to be dismantled. I don't think you can reform apartheid. And I think this is what we're dealing with in America, American apartheid. It needs to be dismantled.
Great points. And back to the film, Kenyumba, you said in the film, resist hate. And I want to ask you, and also Jeremy, you know, with the whole resist hate thing, how do we resist hate when we're constantly bombarded by images of our people being killed, knees on our necks collectively as a people? It sounds beautiful, but how do we do that? Jeremy, how do you resist hate? All of our Black men on this panel, how do you resist hate when we see this every day? Like, it's so hard to fight that thing that wants to say, you know what, enough is enough. And I know we have that thing in us as Black people that makes us take the high road, but we've been taking the high road for a really long time and constantly getting stepped on and kneeled on. So if you brothers can speak on that.
It's really it's really triggering for me. I have been a victim to the police many of times, handcuffed with the spit mask on, a hand over the mouth, tapping out because I feel like I'm going out. And luckily I'm sitting here today talking with you guys, but everything that's happened is very triggering. And I don't know, to be honest, what we do to fight back. I just know that marching is not really getting us too far, and you know, I just know there needs to be serious change.
Okay, that's a very honest answer.
Yeah.
If it was an easy question to answer, it'd be fixed. I think it'd be fixed. You know what I mean? And no one's gonna hold you.
Well, yeah. I think, Claudia, look, in order to conquer hate, first we have to love ourselves. We can't hate ourselves. We're socialized to hate one another. We're socialized. No one is born a racist. This is a very important point. No one is born a racist. But racism and systemic racism grows because it is, some people profit off of the racism. When Brother Meeks mentioned how much the so-called prison industrial complex is a financial system, you know, where they make money off mass incarceration. I think that, Claudia, first we have to love ourselves. To me, when we watch the film, you know, NGUVU WATU, it engenders a sense of caring about one another, you know. And I think when people saw that picture, that video of George Floyd being murdered in the manner in which he was murdered, it did enrage. It should make us angry. It should make us passionate. But what do we do about it? And yes, we have to do more than march, but marching is important. Don't discount it. We do have to protest, but protest alone does not solve the problem. We have to translate our anger, translate our love for self into multiple strategies, Claudia, that will help us to improve the quality of life of our communities. You know, and I think that that's why there's a debate right now in America about education. Are we going to ever teach the truth about slavery? Are we ever going to teach the truth about white supremacy? And of course, there's some powerful forces that say, oh no, we don't want to teach all children the truth about what was done to Native Americans, what was done to people of African descent, what has been done to people of Latino descent. I mean, I think these are questions, but the demographics are changing. You know, the browning of America is happening in spite of the racism. The Children's Defense Fund just published a study last week that shows that the majority of children in America today, in 2021, under 18, the majority of children under 18 today are children of color. So the country is going to change demographically. But we have to now dismantle some of these institutions like the police, like the court system, like the prison system, and the financial system that aids and abets these systems. All of it has to be changed. You can't just change one system and expect that we're going to have freedom, justice, and equality. We got to change all these interlocking systems.
Well,
if I may, I'd like to add what the doctor just said on where do we go from here too, if that's appropriate.
yes.
Of course. So the first thing, I want to thank all the organizers, of course, Black Lives Matter, and other groups across the country. I really want to give a special shout out to what Salimah said about bringing humanity, because, you know, while we say the name of Sandra Bland and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, all of us know that in neighborhoods all across the country, there are many names that are more localized that we remember too, and we want to remember them as more than just the last breaths they take. So I really appreciate you saying that first off. But the public protest, the marching, and the petitions and things like that helps to build pressure that allows us to get policy done. Right now, there's gridlock on Capitol Hill, but I just want to throw out there, gridlock, the Capitol Hill is not the only show in town, right? You can also go state by state. Here in Maryland, we just passed probably the most comprehensive police reform package in the country, banning a law enforcement officer's Bill of Rights, which is a special protections law enforcement have against discipline. So if you file a complaint against them, they get special protections that you as a citizen don't get. We ban that. Using military surplus grade equipment in communities, we ban that. No knock warrants, we drastically limit it, and on and on. But it takes people organizing in the public to build the pressure to allow us to do that. That's on the political side. The other side, though, is that we have a lot of folks, like NGUVU, like yourself, Claudia, and others in the industry that have a major microphone to speak from, right? You can use that. You may not be elected, but you can use your microphone to apply pressure. Many of you all are entrepreneurs who may be listening to this or own your own businesses. Too often people using that dollar goes much faster than the political process. So I just want to say that there's hope when we organize in a way, because too often when we say organize, people always think we just mean like having a town hall or pushing for a policy. That's not just what I mean. I mean showing up in boardrooms and demanding, like, you know what, I'm spending my money in this way. I want my values to be articulated and invested in things that value my life. So I just want to add that to the chat.
I think you make an excellent point with as far as using our platforms. And with that being said, it's time to show the film that NGUVU put together that I believe, we can talk about the negatives and the woe is me and this is terrible. But this film will leave you feeling uplifted and motivated. And with all that's happening, his character in the film, he's still pressing forward despite the obstacles. So right now, we like to present the film NGUVU Kwa WATU, Power to the People. Let's take a look.
I'm sorry, can you hear me, Anthony? I think you got the wrong film. There should be some audio there. It's okay, we're live. Technical difficulties while Anthony's going back and getting us a better copy. Let me just say something real quick, just to kind of speak to what you guys were talking about. Man, you guys are just so on the money with everything you said. This is exactly why I wanted you guys to have this platform to discuss some of these topics. The humanity side, that's the whole purpose of this, is to kind of get us to see how powerful we can be. The idea of starting local or creating value in your own communities is so important and paramount to me, which is sort of like why I'm doing this in the first place. As far as I'm concerned, you guys are my local community. I think community is interesting, right? We think of community and Sometimes it's just street corners and blocks, but we know we're tribal people. So this is a tribe, this is a community, and there's something special about, collaboration and creating coherence amongst our own people. It's one of the reasons why I'm wearing this shirt. I would love other actors to be inspired to become activists and use their platforms for more than just acquiring awards. Like, let's acquire, life changes for our people. My little ladybug ran into me. With that said, I also think it's important to create more value from the perspective of how we vote, how we incorporate our love aspect. Oh man, Dr. Chavis, that was so important. One of the greatest powers we have is the power of love. That is the greatest power, and I think it's really important to consider that fact, because if you think about it, how can you have someone love you if you don't show your own love to yourself? And we have been going through a lot as far as propaganda, programming, brainwashing since we were put on this continent. And there's a lot of that we have to kind of unravel. And, you mentioned a lot about humanitarian, but there's also mental health issues as well that could be addressed that go into the self-love stuff. I wonder if you guys would like to talk about those topics or speak to that in any way, while I go with Anthony and try to get him to get this right film and we can get this thing going.
I love to see us. I have a policy, and even on a very seemingly insignificant level, as far as like what I choose to put out there on social media, I refuse to show us in a negative light. I won't show any hoochie mama, ratchet stuff on my page, and that may be laughable, right? But in a way, it just continues to perpetuate the thought that we are less than, beneath animals. You know what I mean? If I could just ask my brothers and sisters, everyone that's watching this, when you see this, I don't like any of those kinds of things. I know that's it may sound silly, but there's a lot of impressionable young Black kids that see these things, and the more they see it, the more they aspire to be like what they see on television or see on social media. And that's one thing that, like, it's on a small level, but it adds to, I hate to see how we're portrayed, and a lot of times I hate to see us are the ones that are putting it out there. And if we could just put a stop to that, that is just like one of the little steps that we can take. And I love how we're being more open about mental health lately. Finally, it's no longer taboo in our community.
Yes. To speak on mental health, my whole family struggles with mental health. And once all the protesting and the George Floyd murder happened, it actually triggered some mental health problems in myself. And so I now am constantly trying to tell all my brothers and sisters, because everyone that I knew during the protests were all having mental health issues. And again, like you said, it's very taboo. So I urge everybody, especially everyone who's listening right now, if you're dealing with mental health or you have a friend who's dealing with any type of mental health, please try to be understanding and be an ear, and urge him to speak to somebody. It's very important.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that as well too. I think that one of the reasons why I shifted to coaching, which is a healing modality, is therapeutic, even though it's not therapy, but it brings in the impact that these systems and the trauma that we experience, the impact that it has on our bodies. We talk about spirituality. And I remember Sandra Bland's sister saying that she has therapy and she does all of these things because not only is she triggered every time somebody else is killed and she has to hear about it, but also she's often has to be there for the families of those people who are in shock and they have a camera in their face for the first time. Jordan Davis's father, Ron Davis, Jordan Davis is the kid who was killed for like playing loud music. He says some of the same things. So I think I just want to piggyback off of what you both saying, how important make it like ensuring that we are not ashamed to say that we need help, and that just as if we had a broken leg, we would go to a doctor. It's the same way. And I also want to say that, Claudia, what you were mentioning about like what you like and stuff, I think that is very key. This film, narrative shift is really important because police officers have narratives in their head. Policymakers have narratives in their head. It's really, really important for us to use our platforms to actually shift the narrative. And so even in what you think is a small way, to me is actually pretty big, and creating a film. Like, I think people in the entertainment industry really have the key in terms of culture shift. Like, how do we shift the culture and then in turn shift systems? And I'm in support of what Dr. Chavis said too, about these systems are not designed, they're working as they were designed, what Jeremy said, and that we have to completely abolish these systems and come up with something that is actually works for us and has us in mind.
How ridiculous is it that we're made to feel that we're weak or something's wrong with us if we seek mental health, when Black people have the biggest reason in America to need therapy, I believe. Do we have the film ready to go now, Kenyumba? Are we good?
Yeah, I think this is the version right now that we're ready to go. I just yeah. So I guess, Anthony, if you want to let Claudia introduce it, and then we can get going. Thank you.
We good?
Shout out to our producer extraordinaire, Anthony Gadget Mims. Thank you, sir.
We're gonna try this again, but bear with us. It's a new age. It's we're doing television differently now, and if it doesn't work this time, we'll go back to some more fascinating conversation. One more time, I'd like to introduce the film NGUVU Kwa WATU, Power to the People by Kenyumba Utaka Bear. Let's enjoy this film.
So it looks like we're having some more technical issues. Can't hear it. Sorry, Anthony.
Well, you know what? It's fine. People can go and they can visit this website and watch it, and we can continue this conversation with this panel because we have an amazing panel. So let's get back into some more conversations, if that's okay with you. Is that all right?
Of course. I'm actually trying to see if we can troubleshoot it because I really would love you guys to see it. We're going to get through it. Don't worry, folks. I know we've been on it for a while, but let's get this conversation going, and then we'll get it. We'll get this film going.
So, Joe, I want to go to you. How do we get white America to stop looking at us as less than and second-class citizens, and to see them as their peers? Finally, Joe, I want to ask that question to you. Oh, you're on mute. Okay.
I have no idea. I mean, you know, when it comes to being viewed as a second class citizen, it always down to what we are class. If we view ourselves as second class citizens and everybody else would, my grandfather used to tell me that nobody can respect you unless you respect yourself. And he also used to say that you have to act in the position that you want to be. And that's something I live every day. Personally, I don't care what people view me as long as my family views me as a role model. My community views me as a role model. My children view me as a role model. And, you know, to Jazz's point, we work to improve our own communities, whether it be organizing, whether it be through legislation. My biggest thing is getting young black people involved in actively involved in politics and running for office and taking over the position. I think that we have to be the solution to the problems that we have.
I put my mic on mute so it wouldn't be any more feedback. Okay. So I asked earlier, I asked Dr. Chavis about are things getting better or are things getting worse? And I'd like to hear from the rest of the panel as far as like, how do you feel the state of Black America? How do you feel we are? How do you think things are? Are we, how do you feel? I like to get to the emotions and how you view where we are right now in 2021. Is it worse because we have more cameras present and we're catching things on cameras? Or is it the same? How we made progress? Whoever wants to take it.
Well, okay, so one thing that I can speak on that I see real big change in was when we were protesting, we were met head first by the riot police, and pretty much everyone that was in the front line was white, and they all got on their hands and knees, and instead of sidestepping all of the whites and billy clubbing us and shooting us with the smoke grenades, they beat the whites worse than they beat everyone else because they felt so disrespected that you guys are going to go against us with them. So they really showed them a lesson. Now, none of the police know who that white kid's uncle is or his father is. And so they now felt what it feels like to be victimized while in a peaceful manner. And that's one thing that I thought was very different. It was really bad what they did to him.
So with that being said, and Dr. Chavis, I want to ask you about this. Mm-hmm. How did you feel when you saw the January 6th insurrection take place at the Capitol and not near? The response was just, there was quite a contrast with these white folks storming the Capitol. And it just seemed like, and now you have politicians saying it was just like a regular tour. It was a tour. If you didn't know that it was labeled as an insurrection, it was just folks coming to see the Capitol building. How disrespectful is it? How stupid do they think we are?
Well, I think it was a planned coup. These people weren't just demonstrating. I was in Washington on January the 6th on Pennsylvania Avenue watching them march from the eclipse behind the White House down to the Capitol. And by the time they got halfway down Pennsylvania Avenue, say around 6th Street, between 5th and 6th on Pennsylvania, you could see in their, Claudia, they were enraged. Mm-hmm. They were like in a trance. You remember how the group that you saw in Charlottesville with the torches? This is the same people. They will believe that the Capitol was being taken over by persons of color. And when Trump lost the election, white supremacists felt they lost their election. So they were going to take it back. And they would have hung Mike Pence if they would have got him. They didn't care about him being vice president. And a lot of the police officers that they attacked were not officers of color. They were white officers. They beat them down, trying to take their weapons. So this is a serious issue. Claudia, I'm glad you asked the question. I want to go back to something you said in the early segment. You know, it is possible to let love conquer hate. No question about it. But here's the thing. It can't just be Black people trying to change this world. We need allies. All of us have to work together. And I think that what the delegate said, Brother Lewis from Maryland, was very, very important. And my brother who's on the program, who's a Republican, listen, I see him as my brother. I don't see him as a Republican first and a brother second. He's my brother first, Republican. So I'm a Democrat, but I don't go around determining whether or not I treat somebody with respect because they're a Democrat or Republican or independent. I think at the end of the day, we all have to work to improve the quality of life of our communities. And I think that we have a lot of legacy to draw from. Also, I think one of the things I want to give a shout out, Claudia, to Black women. I think, listen, the Black Lives Matter movement was first led by some strong, bodacious, courageous Black women. And I think a lot of times we don't give our sisters enough credit for their leadership, for their courage, and for their utter self-determination to fight back. The mothers of all these victims. I mean, Eric Garner's mother is a shero, and she's still out here fighting. You know, Trayvon Martin's mother is a shero. And the thing is, we need to raise up a generation of freedom fighters, intergenerational, where all of us play our roles, whether we're in politics, whether we're in economics, whether we're in entertainment. That film, I'm going to go back to the film that we're waiting to see and have seen. I've seen some of the clips of the film. We need more films. We need more songs. We just celebrated the 50th anniversary of Marvin Gaye, What's Going On. Mm-hmm. I mean, our music and our poetry, I believe, Claudia, should embody and represent how that we're going to continue to push forward. And I don't want people to become so traumatized or so triggered, quote unquote, that we kind of lose sense of what ultimately we have to do. And I spent most of the 1970s myself in prison unjustly, but I refused to serve time. I made time serve the movement, you know, and it was a terrible, awful thing. But one of the things I discovered, they may put you in an inhumane system, but you don't have to become inhumane. We have to treat each other with respect, with love, and care for one another. And maybe it's just because of my background, I've seen some of the worst of America, and I've seen some of the best of America. And I think that Black people are resilient. African people are resilient. Our struggle is international. It's just not national. And we got a lot more opportunities today to push forward than ever before. So we have to learn from the past, not repeat the past. And that's what I think this movie does. It helps us to learn from what happened over the last 12 months. But after we learn from what happened over the last 12 months, we got to push forward to make sure that 2021, 2022, 2023, they're already talking about 2024, the next election. We got to make sure that we are combat ready, that we're out there, that we're not letting anybody take away what gains we've made. We're going to push forward to gain more gains for all of our people. I'm sorry I gave you such a long answer to your question.
Well, after all the sacrifices that you've personally sacrificed in your life for us, you can take as much time as you need to. Before we go into the film, real quick, Joe, listen, I'm mischievous. I've been really well behaved on this interview tonight. I got to ask you one more question. Being that you're a Republican, you're a Black man first, though. I'm not. It's not a diss or anything like that. Speaking about the January 6th insurrection and you being a Black man and a Republican, how do you feel about your party seeming not to hold the Republicans, hold the mob as accountable as I think they should? All of a sudden now it's just kind of being downplayed. Is that difficult for you as a brother to see this? Because if it was us, if it was any of us that attempted anything near that, it'd be a totally different outcome. So how do you, I'd like to know your take on that before we get to the film.
Well, my personal opinion is this. I think what happened on January 6th was absolutely necessary. To the doctors, I do think it was planned. But from my own personal perspective, I don't think that it was all white people. I got a lot of Blacks and Latino homeboys that got arrested for going in that building. After I literally and just like I stood on the hill and watched him march to the Capitol as well. Why I think that is necessary is because we live in a time where politicians try to have more power than the people. And I think that the people in this instance, regardless if we like it or not, put the fear back into the politicians to be able to represent us in a manner that we feel that we should be represented. These are elected officials and their patriotic. It doesn't hurt me either way to see what happened on January 6th. I don't feel any type of way about the way they're downplaying the event because at the end of the day, Democrats are blaming or Republicans are going to blame the Democrats, and we're still not going to get any due process. I think that, again, to the doctor's point, we have to learn from the past to move forward in the future. Because if not, we're going to be in a serious situation. That's why I advocate for young people to actively get involved in politics. So I don't care. I think that politics need to be for the people. I think that those individuals express their concerns in a manner that they felt was best. Just like throughout the whole entire year, we've had riots in major cities. One thing I also will bring up is,
We get a lot of feedback from you.
Huh?
We're getting a really bad feedback, so we're losing a lot of the stuff that you're saying. Is there a way we can? We get a lot of feedback from you. I don't know how much time. Do we have a film ready? Because do we or not?
I think we should try one more time. Go ahead. Sorry, sis.
No, I want to argue with Joe, because how can you say that it's not a big deal? Like, you're not tripping. Like, we can't even protest like in city. We shall overcome without getting pepper sprayed. And you said you see nothing wrong with what they did that day. You know damn well if it was black, like, we would have gotten met with very aggressive tactics and riot gear and tanks and bullets, real ones, not plastic ones. Come on, dude. Are you serious?
That's fine. Just be happy it wasn't black people, because you probably would have been met with that. But those people put the fear of God back into those politicians. And I think that's absolutely necessary, especially right now when we see politicians having more power than the people. The politicians are elected by the people, so they should fear the people. But when you have politicians in certain aspects not representing the people in the manner that they feel they should be represented, then by all means, do what you have to do. Just like Malcolm X said, by all means necessary. And again, we can't forget that back in the 1960s, the Black Panther Party actually took the Capitol hostage as well. So we can say that black people would have been met with force. We can say that these people were treated a certain way, but at the end of the day, it was completely necessary what happened. It's like the law of relativity. Anything that can happen will happen. We just have to plan for it. But I'm glad that it was a majority, black people running up in the Capitol.
Joe, they would try to overturn an election that most of the states, the Republican states led by Republican governors and Republicans on the boards, certified these results, and these people didn't like the results. It's like saying, "Oh, the Patriots didn't win, so are we gonna go storm the Super Bowl and we gonna get that trophy?"
Democrats try to overturn every single election that they have as well. I mean, like when President Trump was voted into office, the Democrats tried to turn his. When Obama was in office,
that lasted for about 8 hours. We were like in disbelief. We didn't try to overturn the election.
Well, you guys didn't take the Capitol hostage, but there were Democrats who opposed the election. Now, the way people go about the process is the way they go about the process. I personally would have done it. I didn't do it, but if they felt that's what they needed to do, then they have the right to do it.
Okay, Jazz.
Consequences.
Jazz,
I wouldn't hold Joe personally responsible for those folks' activity, but I will say this. My district is right outside DC. My day job outside of being in the legislature, I work for a member of Congress as my day job, and I was on the phone with a number of young Black women staffers in particular who hid in closets as people ran through my employer's office trashing stuff, and they were terrified. And, I think citizens have a right to hold their elected leaders accountable because they're supposed to represent them. I don't know that fear is the appropriate word, particularly in the context in which it was used, because that conveys violence. You shouldn't fear violence as your form of accountability as opposed to being voted out. And I think, if folks want to have a debate over election integrity, we can talk about that, but law enforcement, showing up with a noose, whether it was, real or not, but like taking the time to buy the rope, tie the rope, and bring it, that type of violence is not okay anywhere. That type of threat of violence is not okay everywhere. I think it's fair to say that elected officials need to be held accountable. I agree with you on that. And I'm all for transparency in our elections and campaign finance and, folks' personal finances, and make sure folks aren't putting their hands in the cookie jar. But I will never forget, particularly those young staffers who work underneath me on the Hill, and their fear. And I'll tell you too, a lot of those folks, we were just talking about mental health. Our office had to hire a counselor to talk to a lot of these folks who literally were hiding for their lives. There's no way we can rationalize that as some normal type of civic duty. That was straight up domestic terrorism. Is not for anybody to perform any type of act like that.
Well, I would have to ask this question right here. If you don't condone violence, what did you say about the riots that we've been having across America for the last year and a half, just because we couldn't get simple police reform passed?
You know what? Oh, Salimah, would you like to interject with that one?
That in most of those protests, it were the police that started the violence. It was the police that, and there is a difference between threats of violence against somebody's life and threats of violence of property. And that the January 6th was this kind of racial terrorism, which is in the same vein as the KKK lighting crosses on people's porches. It was intended for the purpose of intimidation. And I think that that's very different than like Delegate Lewis was saying, holding people accountable by voting them out. On January 6th, they were upset about losing. That's different than people marching in the streets because they're being shot and killed by the police. Like destroying some property at a CVS to send a message that we don't want to be killed by the police is very different than your candidate losing. And I think that is a false equivalency that's being made.
I don't think so, because during these riots, there are way more people that got killed during the riots outside of the property than the people who were killed during the January 6th riots. And I think when the autopsy came out, the cops who were killed, they didn't die from being battered or bruised. They died from like heart attacks. The one lady, she was shot by one of the officers, and that body cam video hasn't been released either. But when you look at the riots that's happening in the streets for the last couple of years, I mean, these people are out with assault rifles, gunning people down for the sake of something that could have been prevented from a long time. So I don't think that you can equate what happened on January 6th to the KKK, because the KKK doesn't kill white people.
Yes,
That's
they do.
not true.
Yeah, they killed white allies to black people.
Yes,
There are many civil rights leaders who are white allies who were murdered.
To speak on the point of the marching, I was out there. I actually had my kids out there frontlining, and I had never seen anything like what I saw when I was out there. It was cat and mouse. They were having fun. They would cut us off, pepper spray us, shoot us with metal canisters. Then as everyone's running, they were already sending motor squads to cut us off on the next street. They were pulling around corners, doing drive-bys with paintball guns. This was so illegal. It was, listen, the cops are the biggest gang in the United States.
Hey, Jeremy, let me tell you something. A couple of days after George Floyd died, me and my team actually went out there and we led a protest, a Breath of Life protest. We were the ones who marched all the way to the freeway after that guy in that semi truck tried to run all those people over. So I do agree with what you're saying. And to another point, the reason why Derek Chauvin and the other three cops' charges was amplified was because of me and my team. We actually had the cowards in Minneapolis, the legislators were such cowards. We had to talk to the mayor of Woodbury just to get a meeting with the mayor of Minneapolis and to get a meeting with the attorney general. And so we did lead one of the biggest marches out there. And I can't say a lot of the problem was these young white kids that were coming out of nowhere, and they were organized. I have it on video. They were absolutely organized and they were tearing it up. So to your point, you make a valid point about that one, because we did see that. We saw a lot of that stuff. It was a lot of chaos out there.
There was a lot of chaos. It's frustrating, I think, Joe, and I'm glad you said that. I think that was a great point. When people try to make this equivalency with the January 6th, with the riots over the summer were not just like people just like, hey, let's go break into Gucci and get some purses. Yes, there was an element of that for people that had no reason to be there. There's always opportunists and whenever there's chaos, right? But one thing was over principle and over what we were being subjected to. It's totally night and day. And I don't like how the right has been silent on what about the plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. It's like, it almost like, well, it's their right to have these guns at the State House. And we're going down this rabbit hole where it's just getting so out of control. And we're not even acknowledging or seeing the same thing as reality. It's almost like two different realities. And until we all agree on what the facts are, we're going to be on two different sides. And we can't keep continuing like that, right? Like, we've got to at least agree on water is wet. And then we can go on and say, okay, you agree? You agree? Okay, good. Now we can talk about drowning in that water. But when we just ignore and just repeat these ridiculous talking points, and I'm not calling you ridiculous, but we got to agree there's been some ridiculous things said, false equivalencies. I think we're not going to get anywhere. Let's try to get into this film one more time. And I think this is such a great conversation. We have so many things we could be talking about. This could actually be a weekly or monthly series because the Black experience is so vast. So let's try it one more time. Third time's a charm. Let's see if we can see power to the people. I'm not going to try to say it one more time because I might mess it up. Power to the people. Let's see. We got it? Yes. Okay. It's okay. Listen, these things happen, and it's not like y'all cannot go and see this film online. We actually would love to encourage our audience to check out the film. And right after we get done with this conversation, it's not like this conversation is a bad conversation to watch in lieu of, but I would love you all to go and visit the site and see the film, Power to the People. Let's get into some more conversation. Salimah, you seem to have some reactions to what Joe was saying and what we were talking about. Would you like to jump back in there? And
yeah, I mean,
I'm going to grab my charger real quick while you.
Yeah. I have heard that position, your position before, and it feels like spin. I have been to Standing Rock, Ferguson, marching on the streets. I've been pepper sprayed by police. I've seen police officers instigate, go after reporters, go after people wearing National Lawyers Guild hats, so you know you're a legal observer. And people I felt like after what happened with George Floyd, there was like a collective triggering for everybody who had a story of police pulling them over, harassing them, even things that didn't escalate to the point where that person was killed. We've all had, many of us have had demeaning stories. I had a story about when I first became a lawyer and I was trying to get into my office, and this police officer held me on the sort of trunk of the car and had his gun on his holster and his gun in his hand, and wouldn't believe that I worked there at the place I was as a lawyer. And so I think that there are these things that when that happened with George Floyd, I was triggered, and I thought about all of the families that I worked with. And there were people out in the street who were triggered because we're like, we are being killed and nobody cares. And so, yes, you might have people who are impassioned. There is a difference between defense of property and actually going after somebody. And I feel like Claudia was saying, this false equivalence is not, it feels intellectually dishonest, to be honest with you, because it's very different to be able to say, okay, I disagree with the outcome of an election. But when you listen to the people who are going there, we're going to hang Mike Pence. We're going to make sure that we have, it's the same language that they use in the KKK when they want to round up people. And it's not just that, it's just lynchings in general. It was very much a mob mentality. It was very much like lynching, and we've seen it before. This is not something that, I mean, we haven't seen the Capitol be stormed, but we've seen this before. And like I said, I want to lift up what Delegate Lewis said about people hiding in closets, hiding under their tables, not necessarily know. I mean, what would have happened if these people had actually gotten a hold of somebody? Like, to me, that is indefensible. I can say I have sympathy for people who are economically disadvantaged, who are white, who feel like they've been left behind, who maybe have been duped by certain folks on the right. I can have sympathy for that, and I can engage with that, but I cannot engage with saying that people who are marching on the streets for the lives and the lives of their kids and the lives of their siblings is the same as somebody being entitled. It was mostly white entitlement, going to the Capitol and saying, I didn't get what I wanted, so I'm going to take it.
Dr. Chavis, what do you have to say about this topic and this conversation that we're having? What are your thoughts?
Well, Carter G. Woodson wrote a book entitled The Miseducation of the Negro. And the reason why I bring that book up is because I think there are different narratives. This is not about whether or not the Republicans have the truth or the Democrats have the truth or the independents have the truth. The truth is not possessed by one group. It's just the truth. And I think we can't learn from what happened on January the 6th if we're not prepared to tell the truth about it. It was a mob. It was a terrorist attack on the United States of America. The first time in the history of this country, the Confederate flag is flown, taken into the capital of the United States. Even during the Civil War, that never happened. And so we just had the anniversary of Tulsa. Who do you think burned down Black Wall Street? You think Black people burned down their own businesses? You think Black people massacred themselves? You don't talk about the riots of 2020 and not have a knowledge of the race massacres that this history has a legacy of. So I think we have to re-educate ourselves, not point fingers, not be hostile to one another. But I think whenever you suspend the truth, you're going to get yourself and other people in trouble. And that is a problem right now with America. There was an election in November of 2020. Everybody knows who won the election. But you got people in the Congress and in state legislatures across the country who are in denial. They're in racist, white supremacist denial. And they need to be re-educated. And as a minister, I'm going to pray for them. But you come to my house with that, I'm not gonna turn the other cheek. You threaten my family, you threaten my children, you threaten my community. I'm coming for you.
Oh, he's saying it's on and popping. I felt that in my spirit and my soul. There's a lot of things that we can talk about and things that we can disagree about. I think this is the first step in getting to a common place of common ground, if we can ever get there. Once again, y'all, we got to all agree that water is wet first. You know what I'm saying? So we've talked about the ills and what's wrong. So before we go, let's talk about moving forward. What kind of steps can we take moving forward so we can get to a better place? Because just sitting here saying, well, you're wrong. I don't agree with you. I'm not feeling that, we're not going to get anywhere. So what do we do moving forward as a people?
What's going on?
Is the film trying to come on now?
Hey, listen, I shouted out Anthony Gadget Mims. So listen, I love you, my brother. I'm gonna let you try one more time, but come on, man. Let's.
Sometimes it's playing for the world.
Yes, the platform on StreamYard if you're going to play a video, you have to suspend the other audio, or else it won't. You can't hear a film while everybody else's mic is on.
So maybe if we all mute, do we all need to mute ourselves? Is that?
Or whoever's in control of the StreamYard control panel needs to just put the film on without any commentary while the film is playing.
Okay, look.
You just made us all look
OG with the tech support.
The OG. Okay, respect your elders.
Respect them. Did you mute everybody?
I'll mute myself. Let me see. Maybe everyone unmutes
Anthony,
themselves.
you can hear us. Can you just chime in and let us know if you can hear us? It's all right. We're kind of off the cuff right now anyway, so don't worry. We doing what we got to do. I really want everybody to see this.
We can hear a little, but it's muted.
It sounds like it's low.
Or is that the control room? Can you, is that your producers talking?
Oh, you know what that is? That's the simulcast. That's me.
Oh, okay. So listen, if we don't get this thing going, okay, the audience says I can't hear the film. If y'all can't hear the film, I encourage you all to go to www.watchnkw.com. That's watchnkw.com. You can watch this immediately following this panel and support this brother. We complain that we don't have things that are for us and that move the conversation forward, and then we get it, so we gotta support it.
That's
okay?
Right, Claudia. I'll make sure as soon as we get off of this, I'll have my team upload this to our website, our homepage. So if you go to watchnkw.com, as opposed to it being this trailer, we'll make it the movie premiere, and you guys can see it there. You know, technology is an interesting thing, right? We always got to kind of deal with it. But this is what I was told. You know, sometimes when you have these type of issues and difficulties, that's, you know, a little bit of a deviation to see how bad you really want it. Sometimes you got to break through these things. And I think this conversation was so powerful. And I know the film. I know you guys have seen it, have agreed that it's pretty powerful. And I'm excited for everyone to see it. But you know what that means? That means we're on the right track. We're on the right track if we get these kind of technical difficulties. And, you know, we got this many beautiful Black people in minds together, that we're on the right track and we're doing the right thing. And Claudia, I wanted to give you your flowers and thank you for pushing us forward. Because
thank you.
we could talk about things all day, but you know, you did a great job, and you're doing a great job of getting us focused on action. And hey, Anthony, do me a favor, just go ahead and turn it off, man, because we can't hear it. I think you can hear me talking, so let's just turn it off. Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for holding it down, making us, you know, allowing us to kind of speak our minds and you know, just kind of making the train work in the right way. I wanted to add some things that you guys were talking about, or just speak to some things really quickly. You know, there is a big difference between a protest and a riot. So let's just keep it there, keep it real. But the protesting is a sign of frustration. It's a sign of being underserved. I think the quote is, "The protest is the voice of the voiceless." Correct me, Dr. Chavis, if I'm wrong. What I'd like to see is us. So I'm a martial artist. I'm an athlete. I'm a trained actor. My success came from training, from work, right? And to me, and then I mean this with the greatest amount of respect, because I've seen it. I've been a part of it. You know, shout out to my brother Jeremy for being on the front lines. I too was on the front lines. But it's an emotional response. It's a visceral response. And that energy, like you said, Delegate, it is add value and it does put pressure. But I akin it to maybe a child, you know, getting upset and frustrated. Now, if my 13-year-old child, I don't have a 13-year-old, I have a 13 or 15-month-old, but if that child were to come up with a plan to tell me, hey, listen, Daddy, I'm going to give you coupons every day, and from the money that you save, can you help me buy a bike? I'm going to be that much more inclined to support that young child in their goals and their endeavors. What I would like to see, and you guys can speak to this. This is one of the reasons why I wouldn't say I brought, but I asked the brother Joe Collins to come on, and I'm so humbled and grateful for him to come on because, like you, Dr. Chavis, and like you, Claudia, I don't see him as a Republican first. I see him as a black man, and I see him as a contributor to the overall well-being of our people. And I think that where I would love to see us as a people go, and why I wanted to get you great minds together, was to see how we can maybe turn the protest into a sophisticated, structured game plan. I mentioned the great Dr. Claude Anderson in Powernomics on our interview, Dr. Chavis, and his book is, I think, one of the pillars of development for the Black community. And all of you guys and your contributions and being on the front line, especially those who are in service, and then of course the entertainers on as well. What do you think could be added or included into this, strategic plan? Because I think that's, at this point, right? You're right. We didn't bomb ourselves. You definitely didn't, tase and pepper spray ourselves, right? But we do have a lot of self-murders. We do have a lot of self-hate. We do have a lot of, we dehumanize each other by calling each other the N-word, right? Or the B-word, right? Or being provocative, like in one of the greatest Black cities in the world, Atlanta, where I'm currently at, the most popular thing to do is go to a strip club. So now, granted, this is systemized, but it takes a system to break a system. So, I would like to get your thoughts on that. That's really important to me. And then also kind of driving the conversation to different organizations that we can kind of align ourselves to create more value for ourselves moving forward.
First of all, the strip clubs have the best lemon pepper wings.
Shout out to Lou Will.
I'm just going to say that's okay. Sorry, my bad. You guys go ahead. Yeah, Joe knows it. Joe be spending them Republican dollars up in there.
I haven't been to the strip club since my days in the Navy a long time ago.
But you went.
There it is.
So let's seriously speak though. What do we do moving forward? Because we all know there's a problem. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, there's definitely a problem. We do have to look inward. We do have a lot of issues in our community. You can make an argument that it's systematic. It happened how we were set, it was set up for us to fail. It is a vicious cycle that just keeps being fed.
I honestly feel that, and I know this kind of sounds, kind of cliche, but it starts with the kids and changing their minds and the music they listen to and the type of information that they take in and are given. I'm constantly in the juvenile halls and the group homes and the California Youth Authority, talking to the kids because I was that same kid. And so I really, advise and hope.
Hold on, Jeremy.
And really, now.
Jeremy, you froze up for a second. We want to be able to hear what you had to say, Jeremy. You froze up, and I want to make sure we hear what you had to say.
Yeah.
Are y'all hearing this? You kind of froze up?
Yeah, we lost it.
You froze up.
Can you hear me now?
Jeremy, can you re-say that? Because we don't want to lose what you just had to say.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's that white devil trying to stop our mission here. The white devil.
Happen. Yeah. So I was just saying that I just urge everyone to get involved and reach out to the juvenile facilities and sponsor a kid, be a good role model. They need a good role model. They need to be loved, and it starts with the youth so that they don't make it to the adult facilities and then we have to do the prison reform. It starts with the kids. So please be a big brother to one of the kids.
I think that's a great advice. Delegate Jazz, do you have anything you want to contribute as far as like small things that we could do that make a big difference in the end?
Sure. I read research from a man named Andre Perry from Brookings Institute often. And he has a book called Know Your Price. You guys should check it out, talking about value in Black lives and property. But he has a saying he puts in often in his reading. I've never met him, I'm just a fan. And he says, there's nothing wrong with the Black community that fixing racism can't fix, right? So I think, like, of course, get involved in your communities, but like wherever your space is, if that's entertainment, if that's business, if that's politics, if that's the military, like trying to break down the systems that you see and experience and you have some agency over, right? Whether that's hiring, whether that's, healthcare, I think is huge, and decisions that we make. I think that's powerful. I know for me, I definitely hear you, Jeremy. I'm constantly in the juvenile facilities here in Maryland. That's, I see that as both my purpose and my ministry. But I also try to go into, the schools, to let people know, like, look, you can be young and in politics too. You don't have to wait until you're, 40, 50, 60 years old to run for office. And I think that's helpful, particularly to the high school students in my district. They're like, yo, that dude, he's in his 30s, but he looked 20. Maybe I could beat him, So wherever your space is, I think trying to break down systems to empower people is the way to go.
Thank you very much. Salimah, how about yourself? I know you have something to say.
I always have something to say.
And that's why we love you.
I think for me, it's like supporting folks through coaching to help them really get into alignment. Like, I love that quote about there's nothing wrong with us that racism can't fix. A lot of it is systemic, but we are doing a lot of self-soothing and self-medicating through drugs and alcohol. Like, the toll that racism takes at every level, it's huge, from our medical care to housing to education. It's a lot. And also, like, shout out to the sex workers at the strip clubs. I support you. And in terms of like a plan for moving forward, like, I really feel like the Breathe Act that the movement for Black Lives Matter folks have put together, really working with policymakers, working with people on the ground, talking to communities. They put in a lot of work. I think the bill is like 100+ pages, but it includes everything from making sure that we divest federal resources from policing to like investing in community approaches. It takes into account schools. It takes into account things like housing, like understanding that all of these things are interconnected. And I want to really personally move away from the pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like, pull your pants up, respectability politics, and really look at the systems that are in place. Yes, we can hold ourselves accountable and our communities accountable with love, but making sure that we are not blaming our communities for the ways that we try to cope with being Black in America. I think that's it.
I think that's an excellent point. You can't take everything away. A certain segment of the population give 20 books for 45 kids and no funding for lunch, and they're starving and they're angry and they're upset and seeing their parents addicted to drugs and having being literally 10 cents behind, and then say, well, why aren't you getting an A on your test? Well, I'm trying to get food for today. I'm on survival mode. So Joe, I'd like to go to you for any kind of words of wisdom, advice, things that you could, say that how we can move forward.
Okay. We'll figure out how to wrap this all up. I've never been a guy to broad stroke anything. I think everything has to be specific. The greatest asset that we have right now are the movements that are going across the United States, that are going across the world, the way the movement is ran or not. And so my thoughts are this. We use those movements and we put guys like NGUVU, we put guys like Jeremy in front of those movements to be the leaders of those movements, to press the issues that we have when we use the experience of the doctor to figure out how Dr. Martin Luther King was able to draft legislation and push legislation through Congress, through the House, through the President of the United States. And we use minds like Dr. Hankins to draft the type of legislations that needs to be passed in specific communities when it comes to things like mental health, when it comes to things like police reform, and we use guys like myself and guys like Delegate Lewis to get these bills sponsored and passed through our individual local government officials. I think that right there is the most powerful thing that we can do. And so, like the doctor alluded to earlier, it's going to take love, but it's also going to take leadership and the experience of guys like him who march with people like Dr. King, who know what it takes in order to get things done, and minds like Dr. Hankins, who has the wisdom and ability to find the specifics of the issues that we have in a Black community when it comes to things like mental health, because that's a huge problem. And the courage of guys like Delegate Lewis to be able to say, you know what, I work with guys on the opposite end, on a bipartisan level, and this is what we need for our community. And Jeremy Meeks and Mr. Kenyuba to get in front of the rallies, get in front of the movements and say, this is what we're going to put our energy behind, because if we don't come together, we're going to always have the same problems that we've been having since the 1940s, the 1960s, 1970s, and the 2000s.
Very well said. Thank you for that. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Chavis, I wanted to see what you had to say moving forward. You've seen it all. And once again, your resume is incredible. And so much respect for your sacrifices that you've given decade after decade after decade. And we want to give you your flowers. So
well, thank you, Claudia, and thank all of the panelists. And I want to thank Joe for his last statement, because the truth of the matter is we need each other. We all need each other, and we all should work together. Sometimes we may disagree on tactics or disagree even on the political spectrum. But I think there's not a problem, Claudia, that we face in America today or that we face in the world. All problems have solutions. But we have to, as Malcolm used to say, you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And I think the benefit of this discussion tonight is that we've discussed a range of options where people can participate, participatory struggle, participatory movement building. Not only for leaders, but one of the things I learned, if you want to be a good leader, you got to be a good follower first. You got to be able to take instruction. You got to be able to have discipline. You got to be able to say yes to what's right and no to what is wrong. And I think that from my involvement in the entertainment industry, where I defend artists' rights of expression, cultural and artistic expression, but I also believe that we have to be responsible for what we put out there. You know, some of you may know I was the director of the Million Man March in 1995. And one of the things we learned, this is across religious lines, across ideological lines, across East-West stuff that was going on between rappers at the time. And what we found out was that we stood together that day, over 1 million Black men, shoulder to shoulder. Crime, Black on Black crime, went down to almost zero in all of our communities. We stopped killing each other for one day. And if we can stop it for one day, we can stop it for every day. We have to, on the one hand, yes, say no to the white supremacist terrorism. But on the other hand, we also have to say no to our own self-destruction. You know, there's too much violence that goes on and sometimes in our own families, in our own communities. And so all these things have to work together, Claudia. So I begin this program on a hopeful note. I want to end it on a hopeful note. I think that we have more than reason, a good reason, good opportunities to rise above all of these contradictions, some of which we've talked about tonight. I think we all have a role to play. And so I want to thank Kenyamba again for the movie, Power to the People. And you have to also talk about how the people use the power to help uplift other brothers and sisters who are less fortunate, who are downtrodden. And I think the thing I want to close with, Claudia, is simply this. In my life, I'm in my 70s. I started when I was 12 years old. Got my NAACP card when I was 12 years old, and I thought that was my license to fight for freedom. And one of the things I've learned is that no matter what you face in life, don't ever let anybody or anything break your spirit. Keep your spirit strong. We are resilient people. It's in our DNA. That doesn't mean that we go seek oppression or seek hardship. But every life is going to have some cloudy days. But the sun is going to shine another day. And we have to stay strong. For all of what we've been through, we are supposed to be the most strongest people in the world for all of what Black folks have already endured. But now it's a question of us working together and making the quality of life better for all of our brothers and sisters. So thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel. Thank you for being the moderator, Claudia. And we appreciate all the work that you do in many sectors of the society. And Kenyamba, even though we couldn't play those segments of the film tonight for technical difficulties, the truth of the matter is, while we didn't see the film or hear the film, we felt the film because we feel what you have done with your artistic genius through this discussion, through this panel tonight. So God bless everybody. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's continue to fight and work for freedom, justice, and equality, not only for ourselves, but for all of God's people.
Doctor, it's an honor what you said. I was at the Million Man March in 1995, covering it for the only Black newspaper in my state, the Providence American newspaper. And let me tell you something. It was an amazing experience. And you are so right. If we can do that one day, we can do it for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and we can keep that love going. They don't want us to get together like that in those groups,
That's right.
But we need to get it going. Before we go and get the final word to Kenyamba, I just want to recap the solutions, because we can talk about the negatives and the woe is me all day long. And that seems to trend. Before we go, Jeremy said, show love to kids, be aware of what we feed their minds. Jazz says, go into schools, inspire kids to get into politics. Salimah says, supporting folks through coaching and, working with policymakers, that is the key. Joe says, use people with platforms to push through legislation. Super positive, super important. Dr. Chavis says, we need each other and we should all work together. And we must say no to our own self-destruction. And very important point, he said, you got to be able to say yes to what's right and no to what's wrong, regardless of tribal policies and politics. What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong, even if it goes against your home team. And we've got to hold each other accountable. And our last word will go to the brother, the man of the hour that put this all together, filmmaker Kenyamba. And make sure you go check out watchnkw.com to watch this film after you're done with us. Kenyamba, take it away.
I'm so humbled and grateful for all of your time. I'm so humbled and grateful for the individuals, for everyone who has been on the front line throughout the history of our people. Also, thank you for those who are viewing. Thank you for your patience. I apologize for technical difficulties, but we do live in a technical age, and sometimes they come with difficulties. I'm incredibly inspired after this panel, and I hope that you are too, those who are watching. These panelists have dedicated their lives to the excellence of themselves and thus the excellence of our people. And I would like to issue a challenge if you're watching this right now. It's my challenge to anyone watching this is to smile to the next person, the next Black person they see. I would like for us to learn to start doing that more. I remember when Obama was elected, there was something about it where we just smiled instinctively at each other. It was like, man, we did it, didn't we? And there's something about that. I mean, I really enjoyed the fad of the Black girl magic and the Black boy joy. And I don't think it's a fad. I shouldn't say that, but I think it was a movement for a while, and it kind of tapered off. But that self-love and that self-pride, I would like to challenge us to do that with each other. I saw some disturbing stuff about some of the gang members in LA with the Nipsey Hussle stuff, and I bring it up because I know these guys. It's a juvenile act, and it's an act of posture and peacocking. But we're so much better than that. We're so much more intelligent than that. We're so much stronger than that as a people to come together. And we just got to stop proving these propagandists and these stereotypes right. And we're too much. We're mature. We're more. I think we're at the peak where we know better. We've seen enough. They shouldn't be able to infiltrate our communities with drugs anymore. They shouldn't be able to infiltrate our communities with weapons. They shouldn't be able to infiltrate our churches. They shouldn't be able to infiltrate our mosques. And when I say they, I don't mean to put this as a us versus them, black versus white. I have plenty of white, Asian, Native, indigenous friends. This is not a race thing. It's a mental state thing. I do believe that there are good things about the system. I mean, this is a country that people travel to for a reason. But I think that we have to run our own system. I mentioned before, a system breaks a system. A system will change a system. That's why I say it takes a habit to break a habit. Well, to me, a system is just a string of habits or standard operating procedures that are consistently moving consistently over and over again, and it becomes a system. There's a practice there. What is your practice? There's a challenge in that. What is your daily practice? When we get to the point that we have this pride of self, where we're not dealing with this mental illnesses that we sometimes sweep under the rug, or that we often sweep under the rug, that we can, even we didn't address this, but some of the environmental injustices, environmental damages. I read somewhere that pollution causes just as much trauma to black communities as racism does, and it's really a product of racism. It's our time. It's our time to step up and take on all challenges. I'm a fan of saying that challenges are just opportunities. This is our opportunity. This is our challenge, and we can go up against any force. Like Dr. Chavis says, we are so strong and so resilient. We don't need to have to be, but because we are, we can handle it. We bounced back within 10, 15 years after the Reconstruction period and created Tulsa. There was a reason why that was bombed, because it happened so quickly. And after the Reconstruction period, a majority, and I'm sure Joe could attest to this, a majority of the congressmen and political members of these rural black areas were black. Now it's changed significantly. Obviously, Joe, you have to speak to this as well. Some of the voters changing, voter rights that have changed, but we can have that topic of conversation at a time. I'm going to end like this. I really am grateful that we are able to come together. Let's continue to come together. Let's continue to smile at each other, show love, and whatever you do, be powerful in it. But remember that with power comes responsibility, and the greatest power that we have is love. And that's why I put power to the people. Love for the people.
Very well said. And with that being said, once again, we've got to encourage everyone here. Please follow everyone on this panel and support all that they do on social media. All their social media handles were up during the show. And these people are all going above and beyond their duty and for a greater cause, for you all, for us all. Once again, watch the film, www.watchnkw.com. I'm your host, Claudia Jordan. This was an amazing panel. Y'all can call me anytime, and I will gladly do this. I just need some lemon pepper wings from the strip club, and I'm there. Okay? That's it. That's all I asked for. Nah,
Where'd Joe go? Without Joe, I don't know if we can get him.
Huh, Joe? You said without Joe? All right. This was great, y'all. So Thank you, everybody, for your time. This was great. In the comments, everyone was living for this. So thank you so much. Beautiful black people making it happen. We accept your challenge, Kenyumba. We accept it.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. See you guys soon. We'll do it again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.